first say that you've played your last college game and that you're heading away from Michigan State? You first.
I can't really say, I haven't said that at all. Everybody's just saying that. As far as I know right now, I'll be back. But, you know.
Let's talk about tanking. No, not the military kind, the NBA kind. You know, when teams lose on purpose, or at least stop trying to win, in hopes of securing a better draft pick. It's a controversial strategy. It's been a part of the NBA's DNA for decades. And like any good drama, it's got twists, turns, and a whole lot of what ifs. So grab your popcorn and let's break it down. And if you like this type of content with the guy flopped with Cheyenne, aka the Touchback, go check him out, link in the description.
But before you start munching on that popcorn, do yourself a favor. Go get yourself a bag of peanut M&Ms and sprinkle those bad boys in the mix. You won't be disappointed. Trust me on that. Speaking of me, I'm Cheyenne Hollis. I have a YouTube channel called The Touchback. If you know it, you probably hate it. And if you don't know it, well, you can check it out and you probably will come to hate it. Interestingly, that also describes most people's feelings towards tanking in the National Basketball Association. In order to understand the story of tanking, though, well, we need to go all the way back to the mid-1980s and the Houston Rockets. These are the OG Tankers, a rebuilding team that had actually drafted Ralph Sampson with the first overall pick in the '83 NBA draft and Rodney McRae with the third selection that same year. This infusion of youth talent meant the Rockets found themselves in an interesting situation come February of that season. Sitting at 20-26, Houston was among a gaggle of Western Conference teams fighting for the final two playoff berths. Houston would not end up as one of those teams in the postseason because, well, something weird begins to happen in February. The Rockets just, give up. Starting point guard Phil Ford is benched in favor of backup Alan Lavelle. 38-year-old Elvin Hayes just gets an absurd amount of playing time for no reason in particular. Let's break down his playing time because it really highlights just how outlandish the Rockets approached the end of the 83-84 campaign. Hayes plays all 53 minutes in an overtime home loss to the Spurs in the team's penultimate game of the season, and then logs 35 minutes in the second night of a back-to-back at Kansas City. This, by the way, is the same guy who played 110 minutes in total across 14 contests in January. None of it makes a lot of sense until you realize what's happening just down the road in Houston with the Phi Slamma Jamma crew. The Cougars are led by Hakeem Olajuwon, a generational talent and seen by most in the National Basketball Association as the crown jewel of that year's draft class. What, no Sam Bowie love? Rockets general manager Ray Patterson and coach Bill Fitch become enamored with the idea of pairing Olajuwon with Ralph Sampson, and ownership loves the idea of keeping the dream in Houston.
And guess what? It worked. They won a coin flip against the Portland Trailblazers for the first overall pick and drafted Hakeem Olajuwon, who went on to become one of the greatest centers in NBA history. No wonder they say the Rockets had the best luck even when they were the worst. But here's the kicker. The NBA didn't love this. A team blatantly losing to get a better draft pick? That's bad for business. So in 1985, they introduced the draft lottery to discourage tanking. That fixed it, right? Not quite. For a while, tanking kind of disappeared. Teams were more focused on being competitive thanks to the introduction of the salary cap and the belief that you were just one player away from contending. Spoiler alert, most teams weren't. General managers burned through draft picks and free agent signings like they were made of monopoly money. And a lot of franchises stayed stuck in mediocrity. You could say the championship's hopes were more like lottery teams.
Now, this isn't to say it was impossible to compete or build a contender during these years. There were plenty of examples of franchises who found success by doing this. You just needed to have a non-meddlesome owner, a savvy general manager, and a good coach. Without that trifecta, well, you would end up like the pre-Chris Webber Sacramento Kings or the post-Run TMC Golden State Warriors. The issue with this strategy is that the 2000s hit and you get some really not particularly good draft classes and not particularly deep draft classes, and you see a lot of teams starting to pivot to look for other ways to compete in the NBA.
The Boston Celtics, led by Danny Ainge, and the Miami Heat under Pat Riley, showed the league that one star wasn't enough. You need multiple stars to win a championship. The era of super teams were born, and suddenly the idea of tanking starting to look a little bit more appealing. If you couldn't lure a big name free agent, maybe you could draft your own.
Oddly enough, modern day tanking in the NBA also traces its roots back to Houston. Around 25 years after the Rockets olayed for Olajuwon, the Houston Astros embarked on a tanking campaign the likes of which professional sports had never seen at the time. The Stros willingly become the worst side in Major League Baseball, essentially losing games on purpose in order to obtain better draft picks and rebuild from the ground up. Any veteran player with even a modicum of value is shipped out of town in exchange for prospects or other players the Astros front office thought they could trade for more value down the line. As that is happening in 2010 and 2011, Daryl Morey and Sam Hinkie are leading things for the Houston Rockets. As the Houston Astros are busy revolutionizing Major League Baseball with a full-on tanking strategy that, quite frankly, was totally evil and absolutely terrible for them to do, NBA franchises are desperate to figure out how to stop super teams. In Houston, Daryl Morey would opt to pursue this strategy with James Harden, Dwight Howard, Chris Paul, all of that stuff. It didn't lead to any finals appearances, although there were quite a few wins in Houston around this time.
When he became GM of the Philadelphia 76ers in 2013, Sam Hinkie introduced the process, a full-blown tanking strategy that involved losing a lot of games in the short term to hopefully win big in the long term. It was polarizing, to say the least. Some called it genius, others called it a disgrace. But one thing's for sure, it changed the way people thought about tanking. Now, even fans are in on the act, showing up in games with draft boards instead of jerseys. Meanwhile, the Celtics were playing 4D chess in 2013. They offloaded their aging big three, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen, in a blockbuster trade with the Brooklyn Nets, acquiring a treasure trove of draft picks in the process thanks to Billy King. They looked like they were heading for a full rebuild. Instead of bonding them out, they hired Brad Stevens, who turned out to be a phenomenal coach, now executive, and used the treasure trove of draft picks they got from the Brooklyn Nets to rebuild on the fly. They never fully tanked, but they came close, and it worked.
This brings us to the 2020s, where tanking has become almost pervasive in the NBA as step-back threes, or Shaquille O'Neal pimping up some boomer product. Premier Inc., Papa John's Pizza, Icy Hot? We are weeks, if not days, away from Shaq appearing in one of those super dubious, highly questionable Social Security quote-unquote benefits commercials alongside the likes of Joe Namath and Jimmy J.J. Walker.
Check your zip code. It could be dynamite.
Sorry, Jimmy, but it's really not. And what the hell is up with that background? Who designed this thing? Books? A wood bookcase? Candles? That thing is going up in smoke faster than, I don't know, let's say the late 2010s Oklahoma City Thunder. However, it was that unraveling which would give us
Money.
No, and JJ, please stop already. What the Thunder did give us was a more refined, thought-out form of tanking. It wasn't as much a rebuilding strategy as it was an art form.
Some teams, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, Sam Presti, and the Houston Rockets, again under Daryl Morey's disciple, Raphael Stone, have mastered the art. They started their rebuilds while they were still somewhat competitive, stockpiled draft picks, and focused on player development. It's a delicate balance, but when done right, it can set up a team for long-term success. Then there's the bad tanking. Teams like the Washington Wizards, Charlotte Hornets, and the Utah Jazz have struggled to turn things around even with their high draft picks. The problem? A lack of coherent plan or direction. Tanking only works if you have a clear vision for the future. Not every franchise does. You could say they're less like masterminds and more like someone who got lost at IKEA. But the ace up in their sleeve? Steal from the best. The Washington Wizards front office was poached from the Oklahoma City Thunder, with Michael Winger being a Thunder guy from LA, and Will Dawkins being directly from the Thunder leading the show, while Charlotte took Charles Lee and GM and President of Basketball Operations Jeff Peterson from Mike Budenholzer and John Hamlin proteges traced back to Atlanta and Milwaukee. While Utah has Danny Ainge and Will Hardy, who are both Boston transplant over there leading Utah's recharge.
Here's the deal. No team that has fully committed to a multi-year, multi-step tanking rebuild has won an NBA championship. You do have the Boston Celtics, who tanked on the fly, but they never fully bottomed out. The NBA, for its part, probably isn't thrilled with the idea of teams losing on purpose. It's bad for the product, it's bad for fans, it's bad for players who get caught up in these situations where they're just told to sit at home while tanking teams try to trade them. With all of that in mind, what is the future of tanking? We know the NBA has taken a few steps to try to eradicate it, or at least lessen its impact. Efforts include flattening the odds in the NBA draft lottery, which has already thrown up some wild results in recent times. But as long as the draft exists and the worst teams have the best odds to get the highest picks, tanking is likely to be around in some form or the other. With all of that said, there are still so many questions as it relates to tanking. Perhaps most notably, is it possible for a team that goes full on tank, being terrible for years upon years, to win an NBA title?
Can you build a championship team without tanking? Absolutely. The Golden State Warriors, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Boston Celtics, the Miami Heat, and the Milwaukee Bucks are proof that you can build a winner through smart drafting, player development, and savvy trades. But it's not that easy. Teams like the Nets learned the hard way that trading away your future can backfire, but at the same time, draft picks are one of the most valuable assets in the league. Limiting their tradability could strike creativity. For others, it's a painful reminder that their team isn't trying to win. But one thing's for sure, in a league where parity is hard to come by, tanking isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
One potential way to just limit the absurd asset hoarding we're seeing today, where teams have more draft picks than they'll ever be able to use, is to limit how far in advance teams can trade their draft picks. Cyril, do you see this as something that is viable or even a good idea? When you think about tanking, it's always been framed as this battle between you're really bad and then you'll be really good, or just perpetual mediocrity. And I guess when you think about it like that, is tanking just the lesser of two evils? That's a fair point, but there's also something I would like to add. You know, NBA front offices, pro sports front offices in general, they're not really the creative types. By and large, most general managers and team presidents wait for someone else to have success doing something and then follow suit. A few teams started drafting high school players in 95, 96, 97, and then just a couple of years later, basically every team is doing it. They're trying to find the next Jermaine O'Neal, Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant. The 76ers began tanking in the 2010s, and now several other teams have followed suit. It's only a matter of time for an NBA franchise to do something different, which other teams will then try and copy. And whatever that trend just happens to be, you can be rest assured the Sacramento Kings will still be lost in basketball's wilderness, burning through lottery picks as if they were Afro Man fresh out the dispensary.
So there you have it. The art of tanking is messy, controversial, and sometimes effective. Whether you love it or hate it, it's a strategy that's shaped the NBA, and it's not done yet. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to watch the Wizards lose another game. And remember, in the NBA, sometimes the best way to win is by being the best at losing. Trust the process, right?